Hey there, I'm Anthony, and normally we melt stuff on this channel, but we're about to get a thunderstorm with damaging hail, I guess, and so we're going to tear something apart instead. I have right here a Dell Power Edge 4600, and I've actually never torn one of these apart. So I like to tear computers apart to see what they look like, to see what's in them. I used to build machines as an IT professional by day. I am familiar with different components and how they all integrate together and what their function would be inside of a computer. So I'm always fascinated to tear apart machines that are either way outside my price range or way before my time. So what I'm looking for in a computer, beyond the satisfaction of my curiosity, I do copper and aluminum recovery specifically, like you saw in the last video where I did my aluminum. A lot of those were heat sinks and hard drive platter mount rails. Those are cast aluminum pieces. There is a lot of aluminum and steel inside of a computer. I can't do anything with the steel per se. I can't melt it. I do like having the solid sheets of steel because then I can use them for other things. For example, in the copper video that I did where I made the flat copper bar, I used flat steel from a old Netgear router. I'm sorry, it wasn't a Netgear router. From an old Netgear switch. That switch had a steel outer shell, and it was small, easy to manage. So I like to keep the steel that I might be able to use for other things, but really a lot of the steel ends up getting sold as scrap. And right now steel prices are terrible. So it takes a lot of scrap to make a dollar. So I'm not after the steel. So some of the components that I'm after beyond the copper and the aluminum are these little guys. It's kind of hard to see, but they're MLCCs. They're solid state capacitors. They are monolithic. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. It might be easier to show you where they are though. On a standard piece of RAM, they do exist there as well. There's tiny itty bitty ones that go along in different places. They're on any circuit board inside your machine. You might be able to find them. You'll find them on things in your computer. You'll find them inside your phone. You'll find them inside most general consumer electronics. These little pieces have high value to scrappers that do their own refining of palladium and the platinum group metals. I also understand there might be some silver in there as well, or possibly gold. I'm not sure, having never done it myself. I just know that you can sell these on eBay or to other people, and they'll process and refine it to whatever end. The other components that I like to peel off are these flat top or these flat backed IC chips, integrated circuit chips. There are many that have gold pins or gold wires inside. So we'll get to that. And then the third and final thing that I'm after, I guess, there's all these gold fingers on RAM, on PCI, on AGP, on ISA, there's the fingers on a lot of different things. Gold plating exists inside of computers to help minimize wear points. It's more durable than many of the other base metals, or it's less corrosive than many base metals. Copper or another conductive surface can either wear out faster or corrode and become less reliable. So you'll find gold plating in many places. I'm also after pins. These are not processed yet. I've just ripped them out of a machine, but I don't know if you can tell in the light, but these pins, this is a IDE hard drive or DVD player pin set. These pins have a very light gold plating on it, and it's probably less than 12 karat plating. That's just my guess, I have no idea. But these gold plates, as you slide hard drives in or out, you're going to replace them. This gold plating on the pins helps the base metal of the pins not wear out or not corrode. So it's amazing how much gold is actually in here. It's not really that much. It amazes me how many things have become gold plated with one quality or another. So that's something that I'm also working up to. So I got 2 projects this summer I'd like to get to. Those that have been following the channel know that I'm working towards getting a ball mill set up. The ball mill kind of goes towards this project though. I am going to try to do gold recovery through acid solutions. So the ball mill will be to help break down the integrated circuit chips, those black flat back chips with all the pins on them. That resin or that plastic coating is so strong that it takes something to break them or to melt them. I don't want to deal with more acids than I have to, so I'm not going to go and get all of those extra acids. Storm's here. We're going to take a break. Well, the storm's over. Can't remember what I was saying. Let's dive in. What we're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver, some pliers, and my gloves. A lot of sharp connection points will be in here. Remember, when going through the insides of a computer, there are many sharp points that'll scratch and cause you to draw blood. They'll draw blood. Also, capacitors can hold a charge for an amount of time. The larger the capacitor, the more power it can hold. It's kind of like a temporary battery inside your machine. There are ways to discharge them. Over time, they'll dissipate on their own. This machine has been on my garage floor for about a month. I don't have the tools to dissipate them, to discharge them specifically. Often you just ground them. But if we run into any large capacitors, I don't believe there's going to be a charge on them. So let's start simply. These boards right here, these are daughter boards or expansion boards, and on these expansion boards we have RAM. So these little modules pop right on out. Most people are familiar with their machines. They'll have like 2 gigs of RAM or 16 gigabytes of RAM or whatnot. But these sticks right here, these are 256 megabytes, 256 megabytes of DDR. So this is some pretty old RAM, but this machine actually has another expansion slot with 4 more. So this one has 8 sticks of RAM, which is actually pretty cool for me because that's a lot of fingers to pull the gold off of. So that's exciting. As well as this board has gold here, and these pins that these were sitting in also may be gold plated. So you've got all sorts of connections here. You got these really big MLCCs, these monolithic crystal capacitors or ceramic capacitors. So I will be pulling all of those off eventually too. So you've got these expansion bays, and this machine came with 2 of them, and each one had 4 sticks of RAM. So let's pluck those off. Pull those right here. And typically you would test to see if these are still viable. Obviously, if they still work, you'd rather use them. They've got more value to be reused than they do to be scrapped. But I'm not being very careful, as this was acquired with the intent to scrap and figure out how much gold was in it, as well as other components like the fans and such for copper. So we'll set these off to the side. We'll set these off to the side. Okay, so here we see we've got two processors. Oh, that came right off. So here's our CPU, one of the two of them. They fit down in these sockets down here. So a lot of times the manufacturer and the addition, the processor can be read. So this is an Intel Xeon, printed in 2001. So there's all these MLCCs on it, as well as down in here. But what's really fascinating, all these gold pins right here. And then if you look around the outside, there's these little circles. There's little pockets of gold plating on those as well. And it's on the top as well. And then down inside here, there's going to be some components. Often they'll be gold plated as well. Often they'll actually be solid gold. The wires that connect between where the pins come in to each other. So we'll get to that. But that's a pretty nice size processor, and the Xeon line is a very popular line. This is just an older one. So let's set that off to the side. I'm gonna pull them out. Ta-da! It's not as elegant as I was hoping, but now we have both of our processors out. I have never seen what this is. I have no idea, but it has a similar release mechanism as standard RAM. It's got these little thumb toggles, and it's got the gold pins, and it's got copper. Nice. There's these copper, I'm not exactly sure what they are, but they're in every computer I've ever seen. They're even on hard drives. I have no idea what those are. I have to look it up. Got some processors, and what's really interesting to me is it's got an aluminum heatsink that's held on by this little tiny clasp. Nice gold foils on both sides. You have a lot of MLCCs. You got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 big ones on this side. And then there were some medium-sized ones on this side. And the fun part about this is that is one of two of these in this system. So we won't take this off. I took it off because I was curious what it was hiding. But now we know what it's hiding. We're gonna set these off in our basket over here and save them for later. The amount of copper in these is so low that it's ridiculous, but it's copper nonetheless, and we will take them out and put them in our copper barrel. I've got a little plastic barrel that used to be a pretzel barrel that I like to keep those in. And when I have enough copper, then it all goes to the fire. All right, so let's see, there's a little toggle there, Looks like a power relay. It's a very serious power relay. Not exactly sure if that's going to be copper or something else, but there's no gold pins on this, so that's fine. That's a pretty fancy fan. It's a really nice thick fan, but it's smaller than the standard 120s. This is more like an 80 centimeter. They all come out nice and easy. Just a nice pinch. And there's their connection down into whatever the interface for these guys is. There's 4. And every fan is going to have a nice copper bearing motor inside. And we'll work on getting that out another day. But there's 4 of them. And then surprise, surprise, there's 2 more sitting over here. So we're going to pull these 2 out as well while we're at it. We've got 6 nice motor fans, and I'll set those over here. I've got a box for those. Let's flip these toggles here. We can pull this card out, and then it'll be out of our way. Huh, it's got its own RAM. What in the world is this? It is a serial connection of sorts. It says it's a SCSI connection. So this will connect different external drives, like hard drives, peripherals that require a lot of throughput. So these here, these are some SCSI connectors, and this is a SCSI controller. And we can take that pin set off. I don't know if you can tell in there, but those are gold-plated pins. So we'll save those when we get to it, which means that typically these connectors in here will also be. There seems to be a processor with its own heatsink. We can pop that off. Let's go ahead and do that real fast. This is going to be an aluminum component. This RAM stick has a redundant battery of its own. You've got to be careful with these because some of them are not as stable. If you puncture them, you get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So pop that off. I don't like dealing with these batteries, so I'm going to take this off now and save myself the trouble of doing it in the future. There's a screw. I like to save all the scrap, everything. I don't like to throw the metals away. They all add up together to increase the weight of what I take to the scrapyard. Screws, they all add up too. So this is one of those battery packs. This isn't going to be a safe thing to throw away either, but it's also not going to be safe to just junk at the scrapyard. So I save the batteries off to the side, and I take care of them. They're at the landfill over at the local waste management. They have a battery recycling place, so we'll save that. And just like the other standard RAM, it's got these flat backs. It's got the MLCCs mount on each side. And then it's got these gold fingers. That's pretty cool. Okay, it has another board screwed onto it. All right, so this module is probably a driver board of some sort, an upgrade. Here's the interface port. It has all of the different circuits on it. Not exactly sure what this piece does. We're going to set that off to the side. Now we can see what we have. We have these gold fingers. We have 2 internal and 2 external SCSI connectors, as well as its RAM slot. All of those will have gold fingers in it, which we'll have to reclaim later. But this is what I get really excited about this. The MLCCs are in high abundance back here, as well as these flat backs. These flat backs are really small, and I don't predict they're gonna have any precious metals in them, but they could. All right, it's a little bit dusty, choking me a little bit here. Being held on to by nothing, okay. Well, look at that. That is enormous. That is a huge panel. There's some MLCCs up here at the top. There's some flatback processors right there. Oh, and look at that. Huh. Without even trying, this guy decides to jump off all in his onesie. It's all plastic. It's all garbage. Crazy. I have no idea. I don't see it yet. How to get under that panel. Okay, so we're gonna move on. We're going to, see, I could have done it with my own hand. Okay, let's undo the power to this relay. This is the connector board for what looks to be a RAID setup. Oh, come on. This looks like it's a RAID controller for all the drives that would have sat right inside these bays. So you have eight devices that could have plugged in here. Typically they would have all been hard drives. I am still confused how that comes up. Ah, I found it. It looks like it slips off the back. Ah, it does come all the way out. And there we have it. On the bottom, on the bottom, all steel. There's nothing to this that is going to be reusable. This little wire here, we'll just tear it off. Okay, so we're just gonna set this off to the side as it's all steel. Our power supplies also feed in down here. It comes in off of the wall, comes into the machine, then it's distributed to these, and then this relayed it to the motherboard in two different places for those Xeon processors, as well as to all the drives and all the other areas that it needs to go. Okay. So these are transformers. They'll change the voltage as the voltage comes in. It changes it. Just needed to slide it back so it could let go. These are connections. They look like pin connections, and indeed they are pins, but I don't know what they power. Oh, there's the power supply relays right there. So there's all these pins in here that interface with these units down here. Let's pull one of those out. I had one of those out earlier. And there's more than one. There's 3 of them here. But these pins connect right there. There we go. So these are cable tied in. We could just rip them off for now. Very sharp. It's sticking to my gloves. It's trying to tear through my gloves. I have cut my hands pretty nicely on these. All right, first things that I see these aluminum heat sinks. These are capacitors. Nope, not that. These 4 black cylinders and this massive cylinder right here. So I see another aluminum heat sink right here. So there's 2 of these finger styled and 1 of these more traditional style cast aluminum. But the other thing I really see a lot of is copper. Another transformer, 2 more of these copper donuts. There's 2 more down in this. Don't see any screws. A lot of times these heat sinks get screwed down, but they're not in this case. So, seeing how they're just soldered, these pins are just soldered in place, we should be able to just pry them down. Oh, I see another transformer down there, more capacitors. So that answers my questions though. There's nothing super fancy about these. This is just power power management. So I will tear this apart on another video maybe, but we're done. We're done with tearing apart the Power Edge 4600. Well, that was a very interesting teardown for me. I haven't seen some of those components ever. Those are really cool. I still have a lot of questions about certain components in there, but for the most part, there were really no big surprises. The RAID card, the motherboard, I mean, all these different components are pretty standard in most servers. The power supplies are a pain in the neck to tear apart for what little there is in them. I may just rip off the gold pins, the copper transformers, and the EMIs, and the heat sinks, and call it good. The MLCCs that are soldered onto those boards are usually soldered on much better with thicker amounts of solder than in other boards. For example, off the motherboard. It's easier to pick those ones off the motherboard, so maybe some other tactic like a heat gun or some other way of getting them off may be more useful. So maybe we'll save the power supplies for another day when I have a heat gun or something. That isn't something I own right now. There were a lot of cables in there. Most of those cables are going to be just scrap cables. They'll have aluminum wires or something else. They're not high quality, they're not high grade, and even their pins won't be gold plated. So in our quest to find gold plated or precious metals, they're not going to be a source. The ribbons, let's find you a good ribbon here. The ribbons, they'll have gold plating on the pins, but then the wires typically are not copper. But we'll recover the pins. But ribbons are pretty interesting. I do like ribbons. There are a lot of fans. There were a lot of case fans. They weren't like the big 120 millimeter. They weren't the big fans. These look like 80s. Doesn't say on them what they are. 1.5 amps. Huh. Usually fans are in the milliamp range, and they'll be like 100 milliamps or 250 milliamps. And these fans are actually they're 1.5 amps. So these are some pretty serious fans. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. And when the storm clears, we'll get to melting down some of this stuff.